everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I thought that we would talk about my 26 books that I would like to read off of my bookshelf in 2026, and I have read 3 of them now, and I would like to let you know my thoughts on them, whether I'm going to keep them, whether I'm going to donate them. So that is what we're going to be doing today. So settle in, and I hope that you enjoy. Editing Kelly here. I just wanted to give you a heads up that the next clip is going to be from a completely different day and time, so I apologize for the jump scare. So sorry for my more casual attire today. I just got back from physical therapy not that long ago, but I did finish one of my books to read in 2026 from my physical TBR, so I wanted to let y'all know what I thought about it, what it was about, before I totally forgot. So that is what we were going to do now. The book that I finished today was The World Gives Way by Marissa Levien. Even though I messed up several times trying to say this book's title and author, I still said her name wrong. It's Marissa Levien. So the more you know. The World Gives Way is a science fiction book about this girl named Mira, and we meet her when she is 25 years old. At the beginning of the book, she's talking about how she still has 50 years left of servitude. And at this point, at 25, she's already been in servitude for 25 years. Her entire life, she has been basically a contracted slave. Like, not quite that bad, but like, basically, you know, you don't get paid for your work. She started working when she was like 5 years old in a factory. So she has worked literally her entire life already, and she still has another 50 years left on this contract. She's lamenting the fact that by the time she is technically free, she won't be able to enjoy any of the freedoms because she'll only have 5 or 10 years left to even be alive, and she wants to enjoy freedom longer in her lifetime. She's figuring out ways that she can possibly get out of her work contract. One of the ways you can get out of your work contract is by marrying someone. One way you can get out of your contract is to have it bought by a spouse. So basically, you marry someone who has enough money that their family can buy your contract, which is what she's hoping to do with a shop owner's son when we first meet her at the beginning of the book. However, her dreams are soon totally shattered because late one night, the lady of the house, Imogen Carlisle, calls her up to the roof. She goes up to the roof and discovers that Imogen is up there with her infant daughter, Charlotte. She's holding Charlotte very close to the ledge, and it's making Mira really nervous. Imogen goes on to tell her that she just received some really devastating news and has decided to end her life, essentially. She wants Mira to take care of Charlotte. This devastating news has also made her husband decide that he is also going to end his life. So there will be no one to take care of Charlotte. The rest of the book is about Mira attempting to take care of Charlotte and trying to outrun this catastrophic news that the Carlisles have dropped in her lap. There is a second storyline going on at the same time, and in that perspective, we meet Tobias. Tobias's parents were once very wealthy, but had lost their wealth over the years and had kind of turned into grifters. And we find out that his parents were actually arrested when he was 10, and the police officer that came to get him, don't hit the mic. The police officer that actually got Tobias out of the hotel that they were squatting in ends up raising him. And then Tobias one day becomes a police officer as well. So they don't have a super close relationship, but Barnes, who is the police officer that raised him, is the closest thing that Tobias has to a father figure. We meet Tobias when he's being assigned the task of finding Mira, because at this point, they don't know if she murdered the Carlisles. They don't know if she kidnapped Charlotte, if she had committed thievery because she opened their safe before she left. And also she broke her work contract, and that is illegal, and there is a severe punishment for doing so. And basically this entire book is their 2 storylines coming together and then watching how they both handle this catastrophic news, then how it's going to affect everybody around them. I don't really want to tell you a lot about the catastrophic news because I think it plays such a vital role throughout the entire book. You find out very early what the news is, so I'm not leaving you hanging. You do find out very early what is going on, but I think finding out what's going on in terms of the world that they live in is even more impactful because it was like a 1-2 punch, because you were shocked by the first thing only to find out the second thing. They go hand in hand, but it was so unexpected because if you read the blurb, it doesn't say anything about that. Like, let's see. The blurb from the dust jacket is very short. You do not get a lot of information, and I think that is for the best. Let me read it real quick to you because it's incredibly short, and I think I've said most everything that it has said already. In 50 years, Mira Dahl will be free. Until then, she's a contract worker in a world that demands her sacrifice. Ever since she was 5 years old, her life and labor have belonged to the highest bidder on her contract, butchers, laundries, and now the elite, secretive Carlyles. But when one night she finds the Carlyles dead, Mira is suddenly free a lot sooner than she anticipated, and at a cost that she never would have imagined. Burdened with the Carlyles' orphan daughter and the terrible secret they died to escape, she bolts. With time running out, Mira must come face to face with the truth about her world and embrace what's left before it's too late. You do not get a lot of information going into the book, and I honestly think that is for the best. It was incredible. I was shocked when I found out what was going on. I think it's also interesting to look at when this book was published. This book was published in the summer of 2021, which means that she had to have been writing this book during peak COVID lockdown times. So just imagine all of the isolation and all of the loneliness that so many people around the world were feeling during those COVID lockdowns. And I think it really does impact what is going on in her story and how she is telling her story. I know that a lot of us in 2020 felt really alone. We felt really isolated. Everything felt very hopeless. We felt like we could not control anything that was going on. And I think it really deepens the impact of her book, knowing that this is when she wrote it. I really feel like it makes you think about how you would handle really devastating news and who you are when everything feels really hopeless. And I really like how Myra handles it. She never gives up. She always thinks about what's next, what's best for Charlotte, how are we going to get through this, what is the next thing we need to do, what is the next right thing. I think Levien really captured how hopeless a lot of us felt in 2020. This has nothing to do with COVID. It doesn't talk about COVID. It's not about a disease or anything like that. But you feel the same hopelessness, I think, that we felt in, May, June, July, when we didn't know what was going on. We didn't know how many people were going to die. We didn't know how long these lockdowns were going to last. And that absolute dread that we felt in 2020, you can really feel that in this book. I also like that Tobias, he's just along for the ride. You don't really understand why he tags along when he does and why he makes the decisions he does. But I honestly think it's because Mira is one of the only people who really understands who he is. Like when you peel back the layers, I feel like he thought they felt like kindred souls. And he was going to just follow her wherever this was going to lead because she understood him in a way that I don't think anyone else really did. And I think he saw a lot of himself in her. And I think that's why he made the decision to tag along for so much of this journey. I'm giving this book 4.25 stars. I really liked what she was saying. I really like what she was doing. It is a debut novel, and in some ways you do feel that at times. There are certain things in the plot that we should have elaborated a little bit more on or cut out and made it shorter, because it is 400 pages, 399 pages, something like that. And it felt like we either needed an extra 50 pages to really explain more things or lose 100 pages or so and really condense it down to a really tight sci-fi novel. But that said, I really enjoyed it. I didn't mind the pacing at any point. I just feel like there are moments that you really felt like it was a debut novel, and there's nothing wrong with that because we all have to start out somewhere. And I think for this being a debut novel for her, she did fantastic, and I would highly recommend it. I'm hoping to talk about a couple more books that I'm reading for my 2026 TBR. I need to talk about Out of the Woods by Kell because I did read that at the beginning of this month. And I also just recently finished You're Invited by Jayatissa. So I need to talk about that one as well. But for now, I am going to go get changed and get some of the stuff done around the house that I need to get done, and probably bring our trash can in because the wind sounds like it's about to pick up our house. So I will talk to you later. The first book that I actually read for this challenge was Into the Forest by Kell. This is a fantasy. It's not a retelling, and it's not really even a reimagining, but it does follow the story of Hansel and Gretel, but 20 years in the future. The beginning of the book takes place 20 years after Hansel and Gretel have actually escaped the forest. Hans and Greta live in their family home. It is where they lived with their father and their mother, and then their father and their stepmother, and then their father again before he died, when they were somewhere in between when they escaped the forest and now. Hans doesn't really have a job that he does. Greta bakes gingerbread, and she bakes it with the help of the spell book that she happened to take with her before the witch fell in the oven when she was little. Yeah, so it's a magic spell book, but she only uses it to make her gingerbread, and apparently it's kind of irresistible to everybody. Hans doesn't really have a job, but Greta is able to keep them afloat with her gingerbread baking skills. Only Hans knows about the spell book because they're still in a, if we think you're a witch, you're going to be burned at the stake kind of society. They are not very witch forward in her village. So nobody but Hans knows that she uses this book at all, and she uses it very minimally, but she does use it. The book opens with us finding out very quickly that Hans has amassed a lot of gambling debt, and Greta finds this out from the city's tax collector, Herr Huber, who is a really nasty, creepy man. He tells Greta that Hans actually owes him a lot of money, and their yearly tithe to the lord that owns all of their land in their village and stuff. Their yearly tithe is coming due very soon, and he doesn't think that Greta's going to be able to bake enough gingerbread in order to save their house, but he wouldn't mind if she came and worked for him, with the creepy, smarmy, lecherous looks. Oh, he creeps me out so much. Greta would still like to try to see if she could make enough from her gingerbread baking in order to save their home. She's really frustrated with Hans because apparently this is not the first time that he's had gambling issues, and he has promised that he would stop, and apparently he cannot keep that promise. There's also a old family friend that has come back from war. Their country has been at war. I think we don't exactly know where they are, but the land that they live on is overseen by, I believe, the Queen of Sweden, and they were fighting against the Empire. So the Queendom versus the Emperor in whatever empire, some unknown empire. But their friend Jacob has recently come back from war. He fought, obviously, for their side, and their side won. So the Empire lost and the Queendom won. And so he has come back because everything is done. Everyone has been sent home. There's also this mysterious stranger named Matthias, and he actually fought for the opposite side. So he is Catholic. Apparently their village is not Catholic. I don't know if we know what they are. I would assume Protestant, but he is Catholic. He fought with the Catholic League for the Empire, and he says he's just passing through, doesn't want any trouble, but we're gonna catch some feelings later with him, okay? Greta confronts Hans and tells him that she knows about the gambling debt and that she's going to do her best to make sure that they can pay it off, but he really needs to stop. And he kind of drags his feet, and he's hemming and he's hawing, and he's not really wanting to own up to what he's done. And he's like, you really should just, get married and get a dowry. And she's like, everyone thinks I'm a witch because I supposedly, killed the witch for us to be free from her clutches. So everyone thinks I'm a witch. No one wants to marry me. That is the story of her life. We then find out that Lord Hornburg, who is the Lord Baron over their lands, has died, and his young widow, Lady Elizabeth, is actually going to be collecting their tithes this year, and she needs not 1/10 of their wages, which is what the typical tithing is, but she's going to now need 1/5 of everyone in the village's wages, which is astronomical. It's basically doubling their taxes, and they're given almost no notice on this. The rationale is that the queen still has all of these soldiers that are in occupied parts of the empire that she needs to support. But we have learned from Jacob, who has come home from war, that all the soldiers that were in the empire have been sent home. So there are no soldiers to support. So clearly Lady Elizabeth is lying, but Herr Hubert doesn't want to hear that, doesn't want to know. So clearly there is something else going on with Lady Elizabeth. She is not all that she seems. Greta feels even more hopeless now because it was going to be hard to pay back what she owed Herr Huber and their yearly tithing, but now she has to double their tithing. And that's when Hans finally admits, well, there's nothing you can do. We're going to lose the house anyway. And she's like, say what? And he's like, yeah, no, Herr Huber, he's not the only guy I owe money to. And she was like, okay, who else do you owe money to? And he's like, who do I not owe money to? The way my soul would have left my body. The way it would have left my body. The story goes from there. We are trying to save their family home. We are trying to find out why all of a sudden the tithes are higher. We're trying to figure out why this pack of wolves has suddenly come to the village. We're trying to figure out where this bear has come from, because we haven't seen bears in this village in years. And there's this giant black bear that's suddenly making appearances in the village. This book has a little bit of everything. There are shifters, there are witches, there are witch trials, there is a heist, there is a daring rescue. There's a lot of woman power in this, which I really appreciated. There's a marriage, there's death too, but I just loved the way that the story came together. It seems like we all know the story of how the kids escaped the witch in the gingerbread house. You know, she was pushed into the oven, cooked alive, and they were able to escape. But then what happens next? I love stories that explore what happens to fairy tales and those children's stories we are told when we are little. I love reading about what happens to them when they're adults. They've had this thing happen to them that has changed them so much, but what happens to them when they're adults? What kind of challenges do they face? And I really enjoyed this story. Greta has decided that she is going to do whatever it takes to save her family home. And then when someone is kidnapped, she decides that she's going to do everything in her power to save them. She does not care that everyone thinks it's a bad idea. She does not care that she may have to go it alone. She is bound and determined to see this rescue through. And she does. This book has such quiet, at times, girl power, because you still have this whole, like, if you're seen canoodling with somebody, then all of a sudden you have to get married to, like, save the girl's honor and to not shame the family. But then you also have Greta, who is like, I'm gonna do whatever it takes, and I don't care what anybody says. We are gonna make this happen. And so I really appreciated that aspect of the story. I gave this book a 4-star in the moment, but looking back, it's probably closer to a 4.5 star. It wasn't quite a 5-star for me, but I keep thinking about this book, and I finished it February 1st. I finished it at the very beginning of this month, and I keep thinking about it. It wasn't a perfect 5-star, but it was also a debut novel by Kell Woods. She has another book out now called Once Upon a Starlit Tide, and my understanding, it is kind of like Little Mermaid meets Cinderella, but make them older, I'm hoping, just kind of like After the Forest. And this is kind of a fantasy, cozy fantasy genre that I really enjoy. I really like these. They're not reimaginings, they're not retellings, but they kind of are. You know what I mean? You understand? Yeah, you get it. Obviously, I'm going to be keeping After the Forest because I really enjoyed it. The third book that I read was You're Invited by Amanda Jayatissa. You're Invited is a thriller about a woman named Amaya who is Sri Lankan but is currently living in the United States. One day she receives an email invitation to her ex-best friend's wedding, and her name is Kavi, except Kavi is marrying Amaya's ex-boyfriend, Spencer, and she has a problem with that. Oh yes, she does. Amaya was already lightly stalking her ex-best friend on social media. We're not sure why they're no longer friends. We're not sure why, because they're not friends, she cannot let go and why she has to stalk her. But she does. Amaya has been online stalking Kavi for years. So she actually saw the engagement announcement on her social media and was very surprised to then get an invitation to the wedding. Amaya is really surprised to be receiving this information from Kavi because they haven't spoken since this huge blowout they had 5 years ago. Amaya decides that she's going to go to the wedding, even though she promised Kavi's family that she would never make contact with them again. We don't know why she's made that promise. We don't know if it has anything to do with the blowout that they had, but she is hopping on a plane and flying back to Sri Lanka. We see throughout the book that Amaya has to have some sort of OCD disorder. She probably has something else too, because in her mind, she's constantly picturing ways to murder people that she meets. Yeah. It really reminded me of the book Listen for the Lie, where that main character thought that it was possible she might have killed her best friend, and for years afterwards she kept imagining scenarios in which she would kill people. We don't know why she wants to stop the wedding. We just know that she's basically said she will stop at nothing to make sure this wedding does not go forward. The story's told in a really interesting way. You get flashbacks from the past, you get countdowns of days leading up to the wedding, then you also get police interviews because the bride has gone missing. They can't find the bride, so she can't get married. And we find that out in like the first chapter. We know that she's missing, they can't find her. So the story didn't always flow great for me because we are jumping so much. Sometimes we would, jump back a couple of days. Sometimes you jumped back to more than 5 years before. Sometimes you got stories from their childhood, and then all of a sudden you're learning about things that are going on, with the case and with the investigation. And it just wasn't my favorite way to tell a story. I thought it was interesting hearing about like the super upper echelon of Sri Lankan society and how it functions. I have no idea if it's accurate or not, but I think everyone's a little bit fascinated with how the super rich live and how different it is from country to country. So while I cannot tell you how accurate her portrayal of upper Sri Lankan society was, I found it really interesting. We find out that Amaya's mother died when she was very young, and then her father basically abandoned her in their family home in Sri Lanka, and he moved back to Europe. And it said that he went back to his second family. So I don't know if he always had a family back in Europe or if he just got married like right away after Amaya's mother died. We don't know. He does not raise her. He leaves her in the hands of their family servant, Sita. He does financially provide for Amaya, but he is not there for her emotionally whatsoever. And while Sita makes sure that she's fed and that she kind of, stays in line and is safe, she also is not a mother towards her either because she is a servant. Amaya didn't even realize that having servants was something strange or odd until she actually moved to the United States and saw how uncommon it is for people to have servants. I didn't love that they all seemed to be trust fund babies and work was just fun for them, and that the only people we saw that actually worked for work's sake was like Kavi's father, and then like the maids, servants, wait staff, housekeepers, the detectives, working class people. But the main characters, they didn't have a job, they didn't have care in the world at times, and that was really, I don't know, it just was weird for me. There were a couple of twists that I didn't see coming, especially towards the end. I don't think that the twists made up for the fact that the book felt very slow at times and felt very boring at times. I kind of figured out most of the twists about halfway through the book. And the only thing I didn't know were very couple of minor details at the very end. But then there was even this one storyline aspect with an employee at the charity that Kavi works with that felt, it didn't make any sense in the book. I'm like, why was this part of it? I understand that it moved the plot along at the end, but it just didn't make sense that it was there at all. So it just felt like it was there to help the plot and it didn't add anything to the story, and that bothered me. I also do not like thrillers where it feels like everything could have been solved if you just had a conversation with someone. This whole thing would not have happened if Kavi and Amaya had a conversation. They keep almost having conversations and then something cuts them off, and at no point does Amaya go, "Girl, sit down. I need to talk to you right now." That's all it would have taken. I don't know. It just doesn't feel like real life, because if I had an issue with someone, I don't care how busy they are, I'm going to tell them what I have to say. Like, as humans, that is what we're going to do. Truly, if Kavi and Amaya had talked to each other 5 years ago at the crux of the argument, none of this would have happened. They wouldn't have had a book, which I understand, though. Then you don't have a book. But it's just frustrating that it could have been resolved that easily, and it wasn't. They do finally have the honest conversation with each other, but it's like 2 or 3 chapters before the end of the book. All this other crazy stuff has already happened, and it could have been resolved with this conversation. Because when Kavi actually sits down and listens to Amaya, she's like, oh, case closed. You know what I'm saying? I gave this book 3.5 stars because, like I said, there were a couple of parts that I really did like. I liked the twist. The storytelling aspects bothered me at times, but I did really enjoy the interviews. I enjoyed how we got information through the interview process. I did like some of the fake outs that came out during the investigation, and how some of the things that we heard, you know, a third of the way through the book tied in at the end and was something different than we thought it was going to be. So I did like that aspect. But again, I just felt like there was no reason for the story to get as far as it did, because if they had had an honest conversation with each other, none of this would have happened. And that bothers me that they didn't have the conversation until it was far too late. And maybe that's why thrillers are such a hit and miss for me, because I am very pushy and I am going to have my say and I am going to tell you what I'm thinking, and I'm not going to let plot beats stop me. And so it just doesn't always feel believable for me personally. I will be donating this one, but I end up donating a lot of my thrillers. It's actually why I do not buy a ton of thrillers anymore, because either I'll read it and be like, yeah, it was good, but I'm never going to read it again. Or this one where it's a 3.5. It's not bad, but like I'm still never going to read it again because this book was incredibly frustrating at times to read. Those are the 3 books that I have read so far for my 26 books to read from my physical TBR in 2026. I have 23 more. And I'm hoping to get more done in March. The Poppy Fields is the next book I believe that I'm going to read from this list. So 2 of the books will be staying with us and they will be moving with us next year. And one of them will be donated. And I'm sure someone else is going to love it. It just wasn't the thriller for me. I find that a lot of thrillers end up not being for me. I love murder mysteries. I do not love thrillers so much, but I always try them just to see. I am a little bit behind with where I would like to be, because I think ideally I would have liked to have read 6 in January and February. Then that way there's only 2 a month to read till the end. But that's okay. I will catch up in March. Yes, I will catch up in March and it will be fine. Maybe I can squeeze the Poppy Fields in by the end of this month. I'm not sure, because I have a ton of books out on Libby right now. My Libby holds are holding me hostage. My Libby holds are holding me hostage. It's crazy. Why do they always come in all at once? And also right now I'm hyperfixated on reading short stories by Adrian Tchaikovsky, so that's not helping. Maybe I need to do a whole video on all these short stories of his that I've read this month, because it's been a lot. It's been a lot. Hopefully one of these books has sounded interesting to you and you go pick it up, and I hope that if you do, you love it. You can read it by yourself. Maybe you want to read it with one of your book clubs. I especially think You're Invited, as much as I didn't love it, I think You're Invited and The World Gives Way would be really good books to discuss with a book club. I think Into the Forest would be harder, and you would have to find people who really like fairy tales, fairy tale retellings, those kind of things. But I think the other two are more broad, and they have a lot of things that you can talk about and discuss in a book club. I'm actually a part of an in-person book club, and our book was a romance novel this month for February. Maybe at the end of the year, I'll do like a wrap up of all the books I read in our book club, because we kind of read a wide variety, and then maybe you'll learn about another book that you want to pick up. That is a thought. Anyway, thank you so much for spending time with me today. I hope that y'all have an amazing day, and I will see you next time. Bye. That's not completely how that works, is it? She's holding her youngest. Why is this so hard? You can do this. Stop it. Tobias was the child of a, well, not was, is, that Levien wrote it so well. Not Levien. I'm going to give this book a 4.25 star rating. That was such an awkward way to say that. Why did I say it like that? So at the beginning of the book, nope, they do have, I want to see it. So come over here. This is a debut novel. Then I have this next one that I didn't like. This one is crazy. To Amaya's Yay for hyperfixations. Nailed it.